Smith. Their team is known for honesty, reliability and commitment to the highest safety and quality standards. They're proudly ISO accredited and fully CHAS Elite accredited. No matter the size of your project, KS Civils and Groundworks delivers professional, trustworthy service you can rely on. To learn more, visit kscivilsandgroundworks.co.uk. Now let's dive back into this episode. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Tonight I've got Wayne Ingram MBE on the podcast. Now, Wayne joined 2RTR in 1986. He did tours of Northern Ireland and Bosnia. He's author of a book called Soldier Unconscious as well. Wayne's had an interesting life up to now, for what I know about him, and he's done quite a lot for charity, and especially what we'll talk about, the attachment to Bosnia later on. Hi Wayne, how are you doing?
Frank, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation, mate.
Well, I mean, we've tried for a while, haven't we? So we've kind of got onto it, yeah. Right, so same questions for you that I asked for everybody else, which is, where did you grow up? Why did you join the military? What was it like? Why did you leave? And what have you done since? And I know you've got a lot of, like, what you did afterwards as well.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot to that. But if you just start off with giving us a bit about where you grew up and what made you join the military, just to get a bit of a background on you.
So I grew up in South London, in a place called Croydon. And it's weird. I mean, apart from my grandparents, all my grandfathers, my second uncles and all the rest of it being soldiers during the war, most of them actually were Royal Marines during the war. My father was a firefighter in London Fire Brigade at the time. My uncle worked in the city. And all my other uncles worked around there. No one was in the military. But from the age of 6, I always wanted to join for some reason. And, you know, there's the old silly films of me with marching up and down, you know, saluting and so forth. So it was born into me. And I had some great offers of work post leaving school that could have set me up. I mean, I could have been a firefighter in London. I could have worked in the House of Parliament. But mate, I was destined and set to join the military, so that's what I did.
So, what made you pick the Tank Regiment then?
I wanted to join the Parachute Regiment, and when I went into the recruiting office in Norbury, the recruiting sergeant said, "No, you need a career." So then, as they always do, I said, "Well, okay. If it wasn't the paras, let me be a guardsman." I don't know. For me, it was I wanted the action of the paras, and then all of a sudden, see the guards outside Buckingham Palace, and that's what I wanted to do. But he said, no, he said, you need a career. He said, why don't you join the tanks? He said, because you get all sorts of different careers from the Royal Tank Regiment. And 2RTR at the time was from the southeast. So it was London area around the Essex way. So I said, okay, yeah. So I remember a few weeks later, me and my old man drove down to Lulworth and sat so Lulworth used to have a place where you could park the cars. It's gone now for security reasons, but you used to be able to park the cars and watch the tanks firing, and it was the old Chieftains at the time. And I saw that, I said, yeah, that's me. So that's the only reason I joined, because he turned around and wouldn't let me join the paras. Apparently I had a career in, you get a civvy career from...
the Tank Regiment.
Mate, that's the only civvy career you get. Well, the only career operator I would have had was a H licence. Nothing else apart from a driving licence.
I remember when they were starting to bring the MVQs into the military, and they were trying to map them to the jobs we had. You know, I was artillery, and the only thing they could map, like the lads who worked on the guns to, was delivery driver, because they moved ammunition about. And what a bollocks! Yeah,
it's true. Yeah,
I was down at Lulworth last year. No, at the beginning of this year, I went out in my van and did a bit of a round trip around England, and then I was driving along and went, Lulworth Cove's 5 miles away. And turned the van on and went down. I've been there for years.
No. Oh. And that's the only reason I live where I do live. I live in Dorset now.
Yeah.
Because I thought to myself, I had a posting back at the gunnery school. I was a schools instructor down there in 2000 to 2002. And I thought to myself, there's no way I want to bring children up in South London. Yeah, growing up there was fine. You know, you become streetwise, but it's completely different to the Dorset countryside. You know, the knife crime in Croydon is probably the highest in London. The air quality is the worst in London. And these were the places where I used to spend all my childhood.
Yeah, I think I'd rather be in Dorset. I really would. I mean, I live up in Northumberland. In a town. It's not. I don't live out in the sticks. But every chance I get, I'm out in the hills.
Right,
And get
definitely.
my van. I don't walk anywhere. I'm too old and fat for that. But get out my van, and I just love being out in the countryside with that. So I know exactly what you mean with Dorset. I mean, I spent time. I lived in Wiltshire for a while as well, and it is nice down there, even though it's like too far south for me, really. But it's okay. So I mean, what was it like turning up for training then? What were you expecting of that? Was it a shock? Was it?
For me, I thought it was fantastic. But weird because we turned up. It was December '86 that I actually joined. So I jumped on the train from Croydon, went up through London up to Catterick, and I went out there bloody cold. I remember it being freezing. Got out of the back of the train, put onto a 4-tonner with a load of other guys. And it seems everybody now, when you look at the recruits now who join, they all have to take their an iron board with them, an iron. Well, that was all supplied for us, so we just turned up in our bag of civvies in there. And what it's like. The first day was okay, softly, no problem at all, and then it started. '86, the '80s was somewhat different than what it is now. There was a lot more character building, a lot more swearing. But mates, I loved it. But the weird thing was, usually during basic training, that's it. You stick to the basic training, and then you don't go home. But we went home after 2 weeks because it was Christmas. But I came back early. Yeah, mate, it was. But I came back early. Me and a bloke called Tony. What was Tony's surname? We came back. Literally, we came back just before New Year. And of course, we were back in the barracks, and the troop corporal was a guy called Lithgow at the time, Corporal Lithgow. He said, "Oh, you two are back. Right, you can babysit for me because they had a mess to do." So we were like, "Yeah, no problems at all, Corporal." Thinking we were the best, bee's knees, and we were his favourites. No problems at all. It didn't happen like that. So he just used us for his babysitting, and it was good, mate. I loved it. And then sort of like as I say, basic training was different. I mean, I always remember because we had bed blocks. You know what they're like, and everything was measured. Your locker was, and it didn't matter if your bed blocks were perfect in the whole room. The whole room was trashed on occasions. Beds tipped upside down and all the rest of it. We would do mess tin order runs around the block. So you stand outside with just a pair of rest tins, one over your arse and one over your bollocks, and then have to run around the block. Now you couldn't get away with it now. But all these things were character building, and it was just, I thoroughly loved it. I absolutely loved it. There was not a single day I didn't like, I didn't enjoy.
I mean, I joined '85 and did junior leaders.
There you go. Okay.
So with messed in order, with your you're right. You wouldn't get away with it now. I mean, it's a different society now. It's very different people as well.
I think so.
Yeah, but that's the younger generation. We're of that ilk, mate. We're still like that now.
But mate, listen. But then, do you think about this? That where I grew up, because I remember coming back to the house in London, and my granddad was in the garden, and he was an ex. He used to work he was in the Royal Navy. He actually did the Russian run, so so he saw some stuff, and he said something to me, and I said, "Say again." He went, "None of your wireless talk to me, young man." He said, "Well, I remember when I started." He said we had to fill our own mattress with straw and things like that. So again, it's always going to be different.
Yeah, of course it is. I mean, I interviewed a guy when I first started the podcast, and he's like mid-80s, late 80s now, and we were talking about when he joined the news. He joined in the early 60s, and it wasn't that much different. All the stuff they were getting up to, and the trouble they were getting into. After training in the regiment and this, that, and the other, it was just the same as what we were doing. And nowadays, it's so different that we wouldn't recognise it. And that's not to say that's a bad thing. Looks like we said, society's changed and people have changed, and the army, from what I can see, there's very little of the drinking culture left. Which is probably a good thing, or not. In my view, stuff like that brings people together. You know, especially back in your unit. I mean, you'd have known. You know, when you got to
Yeah.
your unit in squadron bars and battery bars and stuff like that, it made everyone closer, type of thing. Really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially in Germany.
Yeah.
Like I said, you know, there was nowhere else to go. So, I mean, I remember when I first got to Germany, the bloody bars, the squadron bar was open at lunchtime,
Yeah.
and the guys would go and have a couple of pints, and then go back to working on Challenger, you know, and driving these Challengers around the tank park.
It's
After 2 or 3
crazy, isn't it?
pints.
It's absolutely. I couldn't. You know, I think you were allowed 2 or 3 pints at lunchtime. And when I got my unit, you know, all the full screws and that seemed so much older.
Yes.
You know, they looked old, they were old, and they all had that routine where they bugger off at lunchtime, come back to work, and you're just like, wow. And as a young gunner, that wasn't expected of us. We weren't really supposed to do that type of thing until you got a bit more, you know, a bit more credit in the regiment, I suppose.
Yeah.
But still, when I left junior leaders, I went on the first all arms clerks course because I thought I'll be a clerk, it'll be easy. I got sacked. Oh shit! And the bar was over at lunchtime, so I don't remember half the lessons in the afternoon that we had at Worthy Down. So fucking half all the time. So I mean, going from your training going into your like what we would call phase 2 now.
Yeah.
For you know, the tank training. What was that like? Because I mean, if you look at the models behind me, there's a Chieftain and a Challenge, and I've got quite a thing about tanks. I quite like them, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I went all the way down south at the beginning of the year was to go to the tank museum. So I wouldn't say I'm in awe of the tankies because I'm not, because we had AS90 and we had FH70. And I'll come on to that later. Because that was quite fun. So what was it like rocking? Did you do the Blandford? Did you?
No. So all my training, my phase 2 training was up in Catterick.
Right. Okay.
So they did the in-house training. I went straight as a gunner. So I think, did the drivers go down to Bovey? I think they might have done. But the gunners were all up in, and we went up to Walcott for ranges. I again loved it because it was on Chieftains. So I was, you know, learning that. And I remember the first time going on ranges and listening to a Chieftain fire. I actually shat myself because I didn't realise. I mean, we were in the tower. Wasn't expecting this, you know, the tank to fire as it did, and it did. I was like, wow, that's awesome. And being a tankie was brilliant when you're on ranges or when you're driving. The rest of the time, it's probably the same as AS90s. Is spent doing maintenance, cleaning the weapon, track discipline, sorting out the pack or doing a pack change or whatever it is. And I found it really boring. So I got to the regiment in '87, in March '87. And of course, you know, you touched on it there about being a new guy. I don't know if it was the same as you, but they used to call us NIGs.
Yeah, exactly the same.
New in Germany. And for the first 6 months, unless you was on operations or on exercise, no one spoke to you. And you were put in a 12-man room. There was 4 of us in a 12-man room with, I think we each had 3 or 4 of the brown lockers with a towel between it as your door, and that would be your bed space in this 12-man room. And then all the NIGs were put in there, and then of course, and then when someone arrived later on, that NIG would then be moved into a 3-man room or a 2-man room and so forth. So it was a way of moving up the hierarchy. But I found myself being quite bored in the tanks because I had this thing inside me where I wanted to be a soldier, and getting my hands filthy with oil, cleaning the gun, pulling the gun through, or helping do a track change wasn't me really. And then in 1988, they asked the volunteers to go on the French commando course down in a place called Breisach, which is southern Germany. And I volunteered for it. And they said, look, you need to be fit. So we did loads of fitness. Me and a bloke called Craig Arnold did loads of. Tony Dixie was the guy who came back in, going back to the new year. His name's just come back to me. Yeah, me and a bloke called Craig My memory is shocking. We went back to a man called Craig Arnold went on it from the regiment, and we got really fit. And they said to us, "Look, you had to be fit." And there were 30 people, 30 British soldiers who went on it, and only 5 of us passed the pre-selection to go on the course. The rest were all booted back off. It was mad. It was like a 10K run through the forest with fighting order kit. Your webbing, your rifle. They gave us FAMAS rifle, belt order kit, and then you had to do a 3-meter rope climb with just using your hands, with your belt order on, and your weapon over your back. You had to do something like 30 press ups, 30 press ups, 10 pull ups, just for the pre-test. And a lot of people failed it, but we went on to this. I absolutely loved it. It was 3 or 4 weeks of just doing proper soldiering, and that's when I realised I needed to be out of the tankies and go and do something else.
I mean, I've never heard of that happening. The French commando course.
Yeah, well, it was good. There was loads of people on it. There was Americans on it, Canadians, Germans, all the little detachments. But we were attached to the actual French part of it.
How did they treat you?
So really well, because we were proper soldiers. The rest were conscripts. These guys were young conscripts, but because we were professional soldiers, they loved us. They are shite at map reading, the officers. The final exercise was over the Black Mountains, and it was supposed to be 30 k's a night over 3 nights. And it was weird, mate. So they march all night, and then first in the morning they climb to the biggest hill and have a fire when everybody goes to sleep. But their map reading's shite. So I remember we got to the one point, and I don't know if you've ever seen Black Mountains, but it's up and down, up and down. And we got to the top of this hill, went down one side, stopped, walked back up the hill, stopped, walked back down the hill underneath this flyover, stopped, walked back up the hill, walked down again underneath the flyover, past the lake, and stopped and walked back up. And me and Craig said to, we called him Leclerc. He was a French Foreign Legion guy. I said, "Look, what's happening?" Because it was the officer. The officer has the map, and everybody else just follows behind him. And he went, "Well, he's lost." And we said, "Well, how can he be lost? There's a flyover, there's a lake." So we found out. We said, "Right, okay, we are here. We need to go there." So we ended up probably walking. So probably walking about 140 k's in the 3 days. And then the final bit was you'd abseil this 100-foot cliff with your kit on, go down, and then you had like another 5 k's, and then that was it. But mate, it was really good, really, really good, proper soldiering. They were at the time quite bully boy in their tactics. They had a Trinasium. I remember this young French guy wouldn't do there was a 6-foot jump, and it was like 6 foot across, 6 foot down, and he wouldn't do it. So mate, he kept on wouldn't do it, so they threw him off and he broke his arm. We did DEMS. Now you know what DEMS is like in the British Army. Everything's controlled and so forth. And one of the things they did, and a lot of their stuff was from the resistance. So we got there, and it was these 2 range instructors who had just finished this bottle of wine, and you could see, you could see where they've been drinking it. Their glasses before they refilled their glasses, and so what they did, they then put this copper coin at the bottom of this concaved bottle. But so I apologise. So they wrapped the bottle with string which was dipped in petrol, lit the string, then broke the string after it went up. Broke the string broke the bottle so it made a clean cut. Put a 2 pence copper coins in the bottom, filled it with PE4, tied nails around the side, but put wire around the outside to hold these nails in place. Put another 2, so it formed a hook. They then put a detonator with a short det cord and a push detonator on it. Put it on the side of this old tank, and pressed it. But instead of like it being like let's walk back it was like right, run, and everybody had to run. But do you know what? It forced, it made a hole through this young, I think I can't remember, Clark, I don't know. It was a little tank that actually pierced a hole for it. Yeah, it was good. Yeah, it was really, really good.
So, I mean, you mentioned there that it ignited a bit more interest in real soldiering. And you did mention before we started recording that you did transfer away from to RTR. So was that around the same time as that, or is that what instigated it?
No, so I came. Well, it was and it wasn't. I came back from there again, straight back on the tank part. I think, right, I need to do something else. And then they asked the volunteers to go to South Armagh with 3 RTR, because at the time there was 4 RTRs, 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1 being the Scousers, 4 being Scottish, 3 the armoured farmers around West Country way, and then the Cockney farmers were London based. So 3 RTR from the West Country asked the volunteers to go to South Armagh. So I volunteered and spent 6 months doing the build-up training, and 6 months in on the border in a place called Middletown. Absolutely loved it, and for me that was proper soldiering. Excuse me, you know, that was for me that was proper soldiering, you know. And it was a time where we used to jump on the old helicopters, head shopping, doing 2-day patrols around the border areas, and proper soldiering, proper infantry stuff. And then I came back from there, and the amalgamation took place between 3 and 2 RTR. I just didn't want it. I knew it would be back to being a crew commander on a tank, which for some people is absolutely amazing. And if you were to use them in action, speaking to some of the guys who've been to Iraq and using that there, amazing. But for me, it wasn't me. So not long after that, the 9th, 12th asked volunteers to go to Belfast. So I volunteered for that. And it was whilst I was doing all the build-up training to go to Belfast, that the 9th, 12th said to me, look, have you ever thought about transferring? And it was a recce regiment. So he gave me the freedom I wanted, really. So I said, yeah, I could think about it. I did the 6 months in there, and I was a lance jack at the time. They said, look, if you transfer, I was just getting full school. They said, if you transfer, we'll give you full school and your crew commanders. And I did, and I never looked back, to be honest.
I mean, going back to your first tour of Ireland, I mean, it was very different back then. I mean, the first tour I did was 87, 88. Granted, it was only a maze tour, but it was. I was young, and you kind of grew up because, as you know, I mean, as you've alluded to already, there was not a lot going on. If you weren't training for Canada, you were just been drinking, really.
That's right.
Yeah, you were cleaning the guns, you were sweeping the gun park, waiting until the night time. I want to piss every night. It was dirt cheap. And then all of a sudden an island tour would come round, and it kind of makes you grow up a little bit. Only for me, only a little bit, because I was still a twat when I come back from that and getting into trouble all the time. But how did you feel about it for the first tour?
The first tour led me into a false sense of security, really, because South Armagh was a different beast to Belfast. South Armagh, when things happen, they happen big. Big culvert bombs. There was always the risk of the mortar attack against the base. There was the long range shoot from the 5.0 sniper and so forth. So it was big, but it was never any crowd trouble on the border, because it was usually just you and them, and because you had 12 men with you, they wouldn't really do much apart from the big bombs. We had not long after. I went out in the pre-advance, and not long after we'd been out there, it was I'll tell you what it was. It was as the guys were flying in on the Chinook for the main body, and a massive IED went off just outside of Armagh, and it killed 3 RUC blokes and a nun, Sister Catherine, £1,000 bomb. So they were sort of things that we dealt with. Towards the end, we were lucky in that tour. I mean, there were lads killed out there, and we didn't lose a single person. We had one contact against us, and that was in Otnacloy, and it was from across the border. Well, he just launched a heavy machine gun and fired quite a few rounds in there. Yeah, it was typical. They fired rounds and we lobbed loads of rounds back. And then when you get the night report, there's always, even during the day, there's a couple of Shimoonis have been fired as well. I don't know why. But yeah, so we had that. But towards the end of the tour, we had another covert bomb go off where this IUC car was blown up. And the blokes were still inside. They hadn't been killed. They'd been thrown. It was a red Ford Escort. I've got the pictures on my phone, actually. And so we were crashed out. They had the cordon in place. We were crashed out. The UDR actually had set the cordon up. We were crashed out to do air reaction force. And when we got there, so they said, right, okay, off you go. You know, you little syndicates, you little bricks into the countryside to find depth. No problems at all. And so the UDR set up this cordon. And there was a guy called Major Harrison, who's MBE. He was a squadron leader, and he said, "No," I said, "I'm not happy with this. Let's move it back." And he moved it back another 100 metres. And literally about 20 minutes after he moved it back, this another device went off, but exactly in the place where the cordon was put. So a second device had been set there on a timed device, knowing full well that that's where the cordon would have gone. But for some reason, he moved it back, and he saved a lot of people that day.
That's intuition, isn't it?
Yeah, mate. But again, for me, it was proper soldiering. You know what it's like out there.
I mean, you said there that Belfast is very different. Yeah, a completely different kettle of fish. It'd have been a completely different tour.
Absolutely, and so going from Ireland, where hardly anything happens. I mean, I never heard a single shot fired out there, apart from in ND, and that was the only shot we had. The first night, so we got to Belfast, and we were in Girdwood. So we used to patrol the Ardougne and Ardougne and the Shankill, and the other squadron had the New Lodge area, around that area, and the city centre. And first night, we were put straight into guard duty, and posting the sentries, you heard a burst of automatic fire from an AK, which was triangulated towards the New Lodge area. So we reported it, said, look, shots fired, and they said, right, okay, we've got no troops out on the ground. There's no SF out there, so just monitor it. And that was a precursor to what was going to happen for the rest of the tour. We had contacts near on every single day out there. We had 7 seriously injured through coffee jars. We had one of our soldiers who's an amazing woman called Caroline. I actually met her a few weeks ago, and she was a WRMP out on patrol and was shot, I think, 4 times. But for CQB, so she was on patrol with the guys. We just dropped her off, and then she started patrolling off. They fired through the window, just because there was no there was no gardens. It went straight out to the path onto the road. And as she walked past, they let rip. She was in camouflage, so they thought she was just a normal soldier, even though she didn't have a weapon. And shot her 4 times.
That's your lucky to be alive then.
Absolutely, mate. Yeah, and but you know what? So she's now an ambassador for veterans, and she does so much. We met her actually about 3 weeks ago. We have a gathering in our woods, and it's the first time that any of us have seen her since 93. So 94. Apologise. It was 12th of January 94 that happened, and we've been asking for we've had this for 5 years now, and we've been saying to her for the last 5 years, right? Come on, come. And she's always got there. I can't do it. So we said, okay, look, don't put any pressure on yourself. And it's God's law. This is the only year that we haven't invited her. And then a few weeks before, she said, look, can I come? Absolutely. And she had a great time. So she's going to be a regular at this gathering.
I mean, we do something similar in the artillery. We've got a thing called fire mission. And it's like a weekend. Basically, it's like a massive battery smoker. So we just there's hundreds of us just turn up with our tents and camper vans and that, and just get ratted for the weekend. But it's brilliant, you know, that you're back with. And people who haven't been to it, everyone who's been to it has been trying to explain to everyone else in the artillery who will listen, saying you need to go down to it. It's not just about going down there and getting on it. It's for your mental health. It's unreal. It's absolutely unreal.
You're spot on there. We're very lucky that we've got a wood, so we've got a 25-acre wood that a guy called Richard Frampton Hobbs. He used to be a colonel, and again, so he was Royal Artillery as well, and he's got these thousands of acres of land. And a guy called Mick Cowes and I, he's my best mate. We said to him one day, look, because I've known him for many years, said like we'd like to do this, because we used to set up a wellbeing for post-COVID for the NHS. So we used to run wellbeing courses. So thinking he was just going to give us this little area, he said, right, okay, meet me at this good reference, and it was all like, okay. So we looked it all up, meet him there, and it was a wood called Mole Pit Wood, and it's 25 acres. And he said, right, there you go, it's yours. Do what you want with it, but he said, just don't build on it. Initially, he said, look, I'll take 10% of whatever you have come through. And within the first few months, mate, we've made 30 grand from not donations, but from grants from the NHS and stuff like that. So we said to him, right, there you go, here's your 10%. No, he didn't want to take it. He said, right, put it back into helping the NHS and for the veterans. So every year, we started off with, I think about 15 people. And it's just growing each year. So it's really good. We had Damien Lewis this year.
Oh, yeah.
The author.
Yeah.
So he turned up to see the boys and sign some books for them.
Yeah, I've been trying to get him on the podcast. Actually, I might have another go at getting him. He was ill last time I got in touch with him. So,
wait, I've got his number. So Damien and I, is that better? Like it seems to be dark now that the eclipse has gone.
Yeah.
Damien. Damien and I are quite good friends, so if, I'll speak to him and see whether he'll do something for you. But he's an amazing man.
I mean, going back to 9th, 12th, very different role from the Tankies.
Yeah. I loved it. It gave me the freedom of being a soldier, and I was in the boot troop, so it was like a long time ago, boot troops used to be the ones who used to guard SHQ and stuff like that. And we had a sergeant who completely changed things around. So we were doing proper OPs, CTRs, subsurface OPs, a lot of time on ranges, medical courses. So as before, you'd go to work and you'd be doing, changing tracks, track discipline, hubs and stuff like that. Mate, we won't. So we'd go to work and, okay, we'll do map reading. So we'd do lessons on map reading, and then we'd do first aid lessons. So it was all proper, soldiering. We'd go off down the ranges all the time. Fitness was, our fitness was probably, probably the fittest I've ever been. Learning subsurface OPs, learning, different things. It was proper soldiering, and I loved it. I loved every single minute of it.
So I mean, that sounds like the special OPs that we had. Yeah, 7.3 battery, now 4.73 battery. I don't know if you've heard the podcast called The Unconventional Soldier, but it's by two of the guys who were special OPs. And it's them that it's the podcast that got me to end up starting doing this one because they enjoyed theirs so much. I thought, well, I'll give it a go. How hard can it be? Fucking hell. If only I'd known. I don't know. But I remember something they said, and I remember that time period as well, like, the late 80s and nobody knew they existed. You'd see it on Part 2 orders and volunteer, but they didn't tell you what it was for. Or all like that. So, nobody knew what it wasn't. It was until everybody knows what they are now. And the role that they were doing is very similar to what you were doing there.
Yeah, I mean, so for example, when we was in Bosnia, I think it was 97. there was a thing between the Serb police and the local nationals and so forth, and it was a lot of things happening. So they wanted information. So Mick turned around and said, right, okay, we can do this. So we infiltrated via, I think, 20 Ks on with our packs on overnight, and did an OP for a week in this woodland overlooking this these Serb police. Living rough, and at the end of it, we went over, walked out, and you could see the Serb police. Well, yeah, we're fucked here. Went off and picked up a helicopter, and all the information that we had from the OP went to the police, to the multinational police. So it came to fruition. It was good, mate. It was a really good time. But I mean, even when you was on exercise, you were busy. But when you go on exercise, used to go to Salter on exercise with the RTR, and you'd be sat, say, 3 or 4 weeks, and most of that time you'd be sat in the wood, just waiting for the big push. But with recce, you're out all the time, snurdling around looking for things. You were never not busy. It was brilliant.
I mean, you mentioned Bosnia there, and I know Bosnia ended up being like a big part of your life. Bosnia's a bit weird for me. It's the only place that ever affected me, really, and I've said it on this podcast many times. Sometimes it's not what you see; it's the aftermath, and you know what's happened. If you know if that makes sense. And it is that's what bothers me about it, or it's you know what I mean. What really grips me shit, and I try not to say this on every podcast, but I normally do. Someone interested in Bosnia, how people have forgotten about it. I've spoke to it with Civis, and they're like, "Doing on about." It was all that time ago, and it was like, "Fucking hell, you don't know what." They haven't got a clue. And it's just such an horrendous time for everyone who's involved, really. And it shouldn't be forgotten.
Yeah, so it was like the Second World War, really, wasn't it? Afterwards, with the concentration camps. We only had concentration camps, 30 odd years ago. Maniaca concentration camps. Seeing the guys there, and they did a test in Maniaca Lake, because I don't know if you've been to Maniaca, but there was a range there. But they had the range complex was turned into this concentration camp, and it was your typical skinny guys, Croatian Muslim guys behind this wire. But they did a test of the water and found human DNA in the water. The atrocities what happened out there were just, sometimes you can't you can't even talk about them.
So I mean, I went over in '95, attached to 19 Regiment, and we went out as medics. Well, not medics, but ambulance commanders. And we ended up on Mount Igman when we changed to the multinational brigade and spanked the Serbs, give them a kicking. So it was quite a weird. So the first part of it was like really quiet, just like, I wouldn't say hiding in Gorny Vakuf, but we were, because they didn't know the guns were there. Like, nobody knew that they had light guns. No, they'd hid them. They brought them in containers. Nobody knew they were in country. They were hidden in the tomato factory. Until one day somebody went first parade on it and drove it out of camp. On the back of a Pinsgower. That didn't go down too well. So the cat was out the bag. Then we deployed up to Igman. The guns dug in, and it was the longest time that anyone had been on a gun dug in since the Second World War. And then the fight, the datum agreement and stuff like that, and jobs are good. And we let them have it a little bit, and they conceded, let's say, very quickly.
Well, they used to hold up convoys, didn't they? You'd have 2 or 3 guys stood at the side of the road with a couple of mines. You'd see a couple of scimitars coming, followed by 2 warriors, followed by this convoy, 2 warriors, 2 scimitars at the back, and all they do was just throw out 2 or 3 landmines. No, you can't go past, while the village was burning.
We had a bit of an experience of that outside of Gorny Vakuf. They'd done exactly the same thing. They'd stopped it, and it was like a 10-mile convoy tailback stuck there. Right, literally, it was massive. It was that bad. We were running out of beer in the naffy. And all of a sudden the D&D. So the Devon and Dorsets were like a quick reaction force for the whole of Bosnia. Basically, they weren't living in a camp. They were literally on the vehicles, just travelling from hotspot to hotspot. And they rocked up. The CO was in the lead warrior. Pulled up. One warrior, he's went up like that, and then two split to the side. Turrets just straight onto the guys, and they just went, "Fucking move, or you're dead." And they were like, "No." A couple of warning shots. Fucking tell you what. 5 seconds later, that convoy was coming through. It started taking no shit. You know what I mean? It was cool.
That's why it should have been though. But it's just everybody, just let these two hairy ass blokes just stop a whole, aid convoy.
Yeah, I mean, there was loads of stories like that. What we'd heard about when we were over there, and the light infantry with Mujahideen, and yeah, but I'm not going to that one. That's fucking get someone in trouble for that one. I mean, how did you find your first tour of Bosnia then? How would do?
Yeah, okay. I mean, like I said, we were in Šipovo, and it was awesome. But we had a really good squadron. Toon rule just didn't exist. The squadron leader was just a bloke who never enforced it. So it was a Christmas tour, and you'd walk around with gunfire in the morning with the guys, and he'd be giving you the gunfire and drinking out of the bottle of rum to go with it. But we were below the hospital as well at Šipovo. So at Christmas, it was just, thankfully we wasn't, we weren't up at the troop house because we had a troop house that we had to have to go and man.
Yeah.
We were on the camp, and everybody just got arseholed over Christmas, and like the nurses came down, the doctors came down. So yes, it was good, but for us, it was good, mate, because we had a good squadron. We had the senior seniority, the OC, 2IC, Sergeant Major, SQMS. It was the best squadron in the regiment. And then you had the troop sergeants who were just rogues. So of course, you had the full screws. All your full screws were all rogues as well. And then you had little rogues, which is your troopers and stuff like that. So everybody got on really well. It was fantastic. We spent quite a bit of time digging up mass graves, identifying, and I don't know whether you ever did that, but so if it was a mass grave in the UK, or they identified, they thought they had an area where the mass grave was, the whole area would have been cordoned off, sheeting put up, so no eyes could look onto this thing. And so me and a bloke called Toby and rocked up. He was ex-SS actually. He was our int officer, and we rocked up in a Land Rover one day to oversee this one location. And they hadn't found the grave at the time. And the first thing we saw was these two old boys who were literally hammering this pole, this empty pole. Two local nationals hammering the pole into the ground, and then they'd both take it in turns to sniff. No, shake their heads, there's nothing there. Walk off, hammer it down.
Oh, fucking hell,
mate! Hammer it down. Literally about 5 minutes later, 5 meters later, another hammer. No, nothing. Then they go over to a different direction, hammer it in. Yeah, that's the one. And then the digger came in and started digging out the top stall. But we sat there, and just eating our packed lunch on the front of the rover, thinking, what is happening? But behind us were kiddies walking to school. So there was a public footpath literally 30, 40 metres away from where this was happening. They hadn't cordoned anything off. All these kiddies were walking to school, these satchels over their shoulder. And for them, it was just another normal day. They found down, so what they did, they dug down, came not long, 2 or 3 foot, and they came across these body bags with the soldiers in them, the Serb soldiers or Croat soldiers. I can't remember. I can't remember. It was probably Croat. Yeah, and they're like, okay, so some, where the digger had come down, he'd opened some of the bags, and you could see it was trauma where these boats had been either been blown up, shot, and so forth. They hadn't been down there long, but then what we found out afterwards was that the village where this atrocity had happened, well, this attack had happened, the villagers that had been killed, women, men, children, had been put underneath the soldiers. So the soldiers were laid then on top, and we asked why, and they said so that the soldiers would always be on top of that village. And that was the mindset, mate. It was just mad, but it stank. So obviously it's going to stink, but it stank of if you go on a beach and you turn over a pebble looking for crabs or something, and sometimes you get that black sludge underneath. That's what it stinks like. Because a couple of years later, I was on the beach with my two boys, and we were crabbing, and I turned over this rock, and this sludge and the smell hit me, and I was automatically transported back to Bosnia.
So easy how that happens, isn't it?
Yeah, mad. It's mad. Mad. But yeah, unfortunately, this is the way the world is, isn't it?
It is, unfortunately. And you're right, the mental attitude over there at the time of all sides, as far as I can remember, everyone was as guilty as each other.
Yeah.
It's just so complicated, and you were there trying to keep the peace, and you had no power. It wasn't until, like I say, later on, we can change from the UN that we had a bit more power and we could do stuff. I mean, something else happened to you in Bosnia, didn't you? You met a young child.
Yeah, so in 2003, we went back. Do you know, mate, I really didn't want to go back. I was a troop sergeant at the time. I thought to myself, we've done this. I don't want to go back there again. But we were penciled into the Banja Luka, the metal factory. And again, Banja Luka, it's just, mate, everybody was there. The Americans. We were actually attached to the Highlander battle group, but thankfully we were away from them. We were on our own little bit because those blokes are mad. So we were attached to the Highlander battle group, and but it was Rev City. There was loads in there, and we were just looking local patrols, and we had an area called Lactazi. So they said, right, okay, can you go and patrol that area? And the main thing at the time was getting rid of weapons. So they said, right, we need weapons off the ground. Okay. So you go off and patrol, go up into the hill. I mean, the scenery in Bosnia is just amazing. It's some of the most beautifulest place I've ever been to. And we drive up in our in either Land Rovers, or sometimes we take the scimitars out and go to this little farmhouse, and they'd be there, right, come on, and they'd be getting food out for us and all sorts of, sat around big tables. Actually, it's a funny story of that. So we went to this one house, and I said, look, we're here, we were trying to make the area safe for you. Have you got any weapons? And they gave me this rusty old shooting, the hunting rifle. So there you go, you can keep that if you want. I said, oh, thank you very much. And he said, right, do you want to have some lunch with us? So we said, yeah, if that's okay, please. And they set out this table, and this table was underneath this like gazebo thing, or pagoda as it's called. And we sat down there, and at the end of the table was the old man. He was the father or great or grandfather of this family, and I could see him and this other guy talking, and I could hear the interpreter talking to him, and they kept on staring and like looking at me and pointing at me. I was like, oh shit, what have I done? So I said, and I said, is everything okay? And the interpreter says, yeah. He said, so the family lived in this house for eternity. And he said that when he was a child, this is the old boy, he said when he was a child, he remembers his parents. There was two RAF fighter pilots who were being smuggled out through the resistance, and his father was in resistance. And these two RAF fighter pilots from bomber pilots had been sat in exactly the same place I had been. I was like, wow, on the same table, the same chairs. It's just brilliant. But so I had a place called Lactazi. I was trying to meet the chief of police, and bless him. You think, we've been there for 10 years, and the last 10 years, every 6 months, somebody's come to him to ask him, can you do this? I'm part of NATO and so forth. So I was just a face and number, and he was pissed off. So every time I tried to meet him, he'd always make excuses. Or if I say I'd be there at, say, 10 o'clock, he'd then at 9 o'clock go somewhere else. So he was never there. So one day I arranged to meet him at 10 o'clock, and at, I think about 9:10, I turned up. And as I looked in, he was at the back of the police station. He saw me. He's made a beeline out the back of the door. So I've jumped over the counter and gone after him. He's gone into the car park, jumped in his car, sped off. I've gone to the back step, fell arse over tit over the lip of the step into this ball of dust in the car park. I was like, oh, fuck. Okay. No one's seen me. I'm all right. And also, I had these two people laughing. Sorry, mate. I've just come back off holiday, and while I've been on the sun, it's bloody. I'm beginning to itch. So I had this laughter, and it turned out to be the Minister of Defence and a guy called Milos. So the minister spoke perfect English. Said, "Look, do you want to come for a coffee?" I went, "Okay, I've lost one, so I'll go on another avenue," because I thought to myself, I can talk to him about weapons. We went up there, and the first thing they did was show me this picture of this little Bosnian boy called Stefan Savic, who had been born with a severe facial deformity. So he'd been born with a facial cleft, and they hadn't closed it properly. So his face had grown further apart, and he didn't have a nose and so forth. He had this large lump in his head, and my heart was broken because I've always been a real soft touch with children. So I said, okay, I'll see what I can do. And the minister said, well, that's his father. So Milos then gave me his, and you can see the way Milos held it, that you can see he was heartbroken. So he gave me this picture of Stefan, and they were going to have the operation done in Paris. Sorry, not in Paris, in France. But I think the operation was something like 30,000 euros, and his wage was something stupid, like 180 euros per month. It was no way we can afford it. So he said, look, can the British Army do something? So I then thought, right, okay, we can turn this into a hearts and minds thing. So I said, look, I can't promise anything. I need to go and speak to my officer commanding and see what he says. So I went back, spoke to a major called James Farrar, a true diamond of a guy. And he said, look, we can't promise anything. So he then had to go to the colonel, the Highlander colonel. Colonel had to go to the brigadier. It then came back down and said, yeah, you can do it. I remember James Farrar saying to me, look, be careful, because this could be a gargantuan task. And I was like, nah, piss. All I'm going to do, I'm going to write to shed loads of celebrities, get all this money in. I mean, I didn't even have the operation. I didn't know it was going to get done at the time. So there's me asking. So I wrote loads of letters, loads of blues off to all these different celebrities saying, look, can you please help this little Bosnian boy? And I'd had loads of pictures. So I had the picture photocopied, put the picture inside, can you please help, blah, 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 British Army and so forth. Mate, only one person got back to me, and that was David David Beckham. And David Beckham wrote back and said, look, I can't do anything this time. I give loads to charity. I've already named my 4 charities of the year, but if you need any help in the future, let me know, and I'll try and help you. So it's sort of like I dug my heels in then. So what I did, I organised a charity football match. But again, I'm shite at football. I'm a typical rugby player. I don't know if you can see from the but I'm a typical rugby player. So it was the squadron team against local nationals, but I ensured that the local nationals had a team of Serbs, Croats, and Muslims all on the same side. So it was a united front really against us, and it was 4. We had a barbecue afterwards and said, right, okay, we're raising money for you guys. And again, being shallow, it was a hearts and minds thing. I thought, all right, what can we get from the British Army? So we did that, and the minister, we raised €6,000 from that, and the minister said, like, what can we do to help? I was like, well, we can do an arms amnesty. He said, okay, leave it with me. So literally about 3 or 4 days later, he said to me, right, okay, on Saturday, such and such a date, we're going to do an arms amnesty. I said, right, okay, where do you want me to meet you? He said, well, don't do anything during the day. Just turn up to collect the weapons at the end of the day, and we'll do it all, because they're different little municipalities out there. Okay. Mate, it was like a scene from Jaws. When the shark comes and he turns around to him and says, we're going to need a bigger boat. we rocked up in a couple of Land Rovers, and I turned around to Gibbo, Dale Gibson. I went, fuck me, we're going to need a 4-tonner. I said, you have to speak to Des. So I phoned up the Sergeant Major, I think Des. I said, mate, I said, I need you to come down with a 4-tonner. I said, and I need you to bring ATO. There was something like 60 or 70 AKs. There was anti-tank grenades. Mate, it was 7 RPGs with warheads. There was tens of thousands of boxes of 7.62, of 9mm, 30, 40 pistols. It was an Ingram submachine gun. There was boxes and boxes of hand grenades. And I thought to myself then, you imagine if these are the ones that they've managed to get off the streets, they're not going to get rid of everything. So there's still shitloads of weaponry out there somewhere. But yeah, so we did that. The only thing I wish I'd done was I wish I'd got the OC to get the colonel to come down, because it would have been a big feather on our cap. But yeah, so I did that. I then contacted a bloke called David Dunaway, Professor David Dunaway, CBE, from Great Ormond Street, and at the time they said, right, okay, he's not at Great Ormond Street, because he was a craniofacial surgeon. But his address was something like 1 Harley Street. That's the sort of calibre of the guy. And they said, right, can you phone him there? So we'll phone him first. And when I phoned him, every time you speak to him, it's like speaking to your grandfather, your uncle, your dad, and your brother all rolled into one. He's the nicest person, and he wants to know about you. So so we spent the first 10 minutes talking about the Bosnian economy, the healthcare there, how the children have been treated, and so forth. That's what you want to know. And he said, look, I can't promise anything. I need to see a CT scan, and then I'd need to see him in person. So I got a CT scan done, which again was another bizarre event. So we had this address, which wasn't at the hospital. I said, well, why is it not hospital? And he said, well, it was acquired during the war, and it's now in this address. Okay, so we went to this address, and at a time and date stated was Slava, Stefan, and the interpreter, and me and a couple of other guys. And it was a guy who walked into this big stately home, and there was a guy sat in this hallway behind a desk. And I said, hi through the interpreter. I said, oh yeah, we're expecting you. He said, okay. So he said, if you go downstairs, it was a cellar, in the cellar. He said, if you go down the cellar, he said, you'll meet the engineer down there. I said, okay. So we went down, mate, just on the truth, right? So we went into this cellar. As you walk down, the same bloke has now walked out, but instead of wearing a suit, he's now wearing a white jacket. He went, hello, how may I help you? I was like, we've come for the CT scanner. He went, yes. He said, there's a slight problem with CT scanner, mate. He said, the engineers are in there. He went in, took off the white coat, put on a brown one, and started hammering the part of the CT scanner. He came out literally about 5 minutes later. He went, yes, it's sorted now. He said, well, would you like to sign some forms and come in? So I was bloody call me a coward, but I said, listen, I need to go and do something. So I then got me and the lads, drove in a Land Rover. We drove like 14 blocks away behind a lead wall, just to just so we didn't get radiated. And but it was good because we followed the glow on the way back. But I said to so I sent I went home on R&R, and I posted the CT, because I had the CT scans with me. I posted them off to David Dunaway, and his reply was, Well, they're not the best ones I've ever seen, but I think I can do so. Obviously, I didn't tell him how we went about it. We managed to get Stefan across in the May, June, that time. At this stage, I'd been rattling the tin. Well, I spent all of my R&R just raising money, going to the local supermarkets, standing at the end of the tills with buckets, packing shopping. I was at the local football match. The local paper got hold of it. The local radio got hold of it. Said, right, British soldier raising money. I was doing barbecues outside of Asda. Mate, it was fantastic. So by the time that, so he apologised. Stefan came over. David said, "Yeah, I can operate. When do you want to do it?" And it would have come to about something like 20 or 25 grand. And David said to me, "Look, just to let you know, I won't charge you a single penny for my cost." So this Harley Street surgeon didn't charge a single penny any time. So he came back that time. Came back in October, and at this stage I'd raised about £80,000, and Stefan had his certain teeth removed, and then I can't remember the date of it. It was later on in October. He then went in for a 12-hour operation, and mate, it broke my heart because I've invested so much, and it had gone from a hearts and minds thing into, do you know what, this family, because every time we turned up, mate, they were just amazing. They really looked after us, looked after the troops. They didn't want anything in return, and it went from that to a genuine love for the family, and to get told that, okay, we're going to correct his facial deformity, but he could become brain dead, he could become blind, he could die. So Slava signed all these, signed the paperwork thinking that this could happen. I mean, the chance of it happening, I think, was slim. But it was always that in the back of my mind. And I just, I remember one time I just broke down the tears in the shower the night of the night before the operation, thinking, shit, what have I done? Who am I to put this family through this? So Stefan had a 12-hour operation. And what they did, they completely took off all of his face, peeled it back, took away the bones of the skull, moved his eyes out of the way, moved his part of his brain out of the way, re-sculptured the skull into how a little boy would look. Because what they realised from the actual, because we had proper CT scans done in Great Ormond Street, and then they realised that he had 3 lumps of bone missing from his skull, which gave straight access to the brain. So at some stage he would have contracted a meningitis or some infection and potentially died from that. And he didn't have a nasal airway. So over time they reconnected this or corrected this facial deformity, sealed up these holes, and started the operation to sort out his nasal airway. And 12 hours later, we went down to the Heidi Penson unit to see this little 4-year-old boy laid there. And even though he was bandaged, his whole face was bandaged, you could see the transformation. And it was just, I think, about 4 or 5 days later, it was supposed to be about a week, 2 weeks, 4 or 5 days later, we walked in there, because he said that he needed to rest his eyes. We walked in there to find the bandages off, mate, and Stefan's there looking and smiling at me. Yeah, it was just, the transformation is absolutely amazing.
I mean, the sense of accomplishment from that as well must have been overwhelming.
Oh, it was. It was like a massive weight lifted off your shoulders. But then, again, it's so naive because I thought, no, that's it, that's done. And David said, look, really, this is just the start of it. We've done the main thing, but he's 4 years of age. His skull is going to continue to grow, and we're going to have to do further surgeries for this. So, in all, over 13 years, he had 5 operations at a cost of £160,000. That was £160,000 raised. David never charged a single penny. and the money went to, because it was all done privately, so the money went to hiring the hospitals, hiring all the anaesthetists, the nurses, and all the equipment, the accommodation, the flights to and from, the food, and so forth. So it all mounted up. But no, mate, he's absolutely amazing. He now he's still living in Bosnia. He's he plays either the accordion or the synthesizer for a local folk band, and they travel around Bosnia.
Oh,
He's doing really well. He's such an amazing guy. The whole family are.
I mean, after something like that, how did that affect you back in the unit?
Well, mate, so in 2003, in 2000 I broke my ankle in 6 places when I was down at the gunnery school. As I say, I used to play loads of rugby, and one day I walked out. It was a Friday afternoon. I played on the Wednesday. Was due to play on the Saturday for the civvy team. Walked out to the grass, slipped, and felt this immediate pain. Walked back in. It's like I've broken my ankle. I twisted my ankle, and the bloke I was living with went. He said, "I think that's broken." I broke it in 6 places. I had pins and plates fitted, just from slipping on the grass. I was in plaster for 8 weeks, and because at the time I was fairly fit, like a silly arse, the day they took me out of plaster, I decided to go for a 5-mile run. And I got, after about 2 or 3 miles, mate, I was just in tears with the pain. Managed to hobble back to camp, straight back up to hospital, and I'd undone everything which had been done. So it was just, problem after problem. And then in 2003, whilst I was in Bosnia, I broke my ankle again. And but because I was a sergeant, just about to pick up my staff sergeant, I just thought, right, I can't do anything. So I just kept on doing my boot up. I thought I'd broken it, didn't know. Just kept on doing my boot up really tight. After a few days, it was just black, swollen, couldn't do that. Ended up back in the shipper, actually, in the field hospital. They operated. So then I was put back to the gunnery school on promotion. So I was still fundraising while I was back at the gunnery school. So the operation was happening whilst I was back at the gunnery school, and then broke it again when I was in the gunnery school. Tripped on it, mate, and it broke. It was really weak. Ended up in Headley Court, and then broke it again in the December, Christmas Eve.
There you are.
While I was in Headley Court, and they said, "Look, staff, just stay there. We'll come back after you finish." And I remember going back weeks later, back to Headley Court, and they said, "Right, there's nothing more we can do. It's obviously really weak." And I remember this colonel surgeon saying, "Well, we can whip it up for you if you want," because I was in so much pain. I said, "Well, will that stop the pain?" He went, "Yes, maybe." I went, "Sorry, Colonel, maybe." He said, "Well, you might get fans in pain." I said, "Well, I might as well keep my leg then." He went, "Up to you," and then just walked away. I was like, so they put me on a thing called the wireless, which I never knew what the wireless was. For me, I thought that I was just at home waiting for them to find me another job. Unbeknown to me, the wireless was, okay, you are now unfit for service. So all of a sudden, I got this. I hadn't heard from the regiment at all, and I got this telephone call from Man in Records saying, "Right, just let you know your discharge has been approved." I went, "What discharge?" They said, "Well, you're being medically discharged." I was like, "Well, I don't want it." Well, sorry, staff. There's nothing you can do. You're P8, so you've got to be medically discharged. So I phoned the regiment. Spoke to the RSM at the time, a bloke called Steve. I said, "Steve, because we obviously we knew each other. As a regiment, it's a fairly small thing, small unit, and everybody because you've watched them." I said, "Steve, mate," I said, "they're discharging me." He went, "Yeah, I know. I'm really sorry." I said, "Can you not find me a job, as a staff, as a bloody SQMS somewhere?" He went, "I can't." He said, "You've got to go." He said, "That's man the record." He said, "But just to let you know," he said, "you've got an unpaid silver bill." I went, "I beg your pardon?" He said, "Yeah, 260 euros silver that you need to pay." I went, "Well, not really funny." I said, "You can shove it up your arse." And joking, he went, well, you can't speak Malay. I said, I'm the RSM. I said, well, mate, I said, I'm not a paramedic. I said, I haven't been there. He said, well, you won't get your leaving present then. I said, well, you can shove it up your arse with a misbill. And that's the last time I heard of him. So for me, it was like a bereavement. So most of the stuff, so for a good, for a good 12 years out of 13, I raised the money as a civic.
I mean, that must be fucking annoying, especially to be treated like that. Nobody being in contact with the regiment, and then out of the blue. That must leave a bitter taste in your mouth.
Yeah, it just goes. I'll tell you what was even worse was so I had to go and have my 1157 in at Bovey, and Bovey at the time was a training regiment, phase 2 training. So I went into the stores, and of course it's all run by civvies now. So I'm stood. There was I didn't notice there was this white line right before the counter. So I'm stood on the counter, put my stuff on there, and this old civvy comes in. Oh, you stand behind the line. I went, who the fuck do you think you're speaking to? So I'm fucking as if it made it. I went, I'm Staff Sergeant Ingram. So don't fucking speak to me like that. He went, sorry, staff. He said, he said we usually do with recruits. I said, well, I'm handing my 1157 in. Do you know what the bastard did? He billed me for my red and white PT vests because I didn't have them.
What a wanker.
And then I went upstairs to some fucking spotty-faced youth who was working in RHQ, who went, and I'm playing fucking in it. So I'm standing to attention. I really didn't want to go, holding back tears like that, because I mean, my mental health at the time was knackered anyway. So I was holding back tears like that, and I said, look, Staff Sergeant Ingram, I'm being medically discharged. He went, yeah, no problem at all, thanks. Opened up the top cupboard, or top drawer, brought out this silver pair of scissors, which were the size that, the big ones that you cut cloth with. Got my ID card, cut it straight in half, and he went, thanks very much. And that was it. That was my service. 18 years. I mean, I would have stayed. I would have still been a crusty major, or hopefully a colonel by now. But no, mate, it wasn't meant to be. So I left that in the December 2004, exactly 18 years after I joined. And then in the January, I joined the ambulance service as a technician, and then qualified as a paramedic a year later.
I'm kind of flabbergasted in a way that we can be treated like that. You know what I mean? And I was quite lucky. I did 27 years, got out as a full screw. My last 6 months, they just sent me home. They just went, fucking, got nothing for you, go on. And I lived on camp, so I was like, all right, okay. But again, it's that when you leave, and I mean, I didn't leave under them circumstances, but I didn't have a leaving due or anything like that. And that affected me later, as I found out when I had to go and get some counselling. So there was no closure. Like you said, it's like a bereavement. It's it's because there's no, like, how can I put it, finality to it. Like I said, it's like a leaving due. Saying to that is, that's one of the things that's for, what it helps for. And then when you get nothing, and all of a sudden you transition into Civvy Street, and I thought, this is easy. I'm fine. Civvies are cunts and all this and this, that, and the other. I'm special. And out there, out in the real wild world, and there's no help unless you go look for it yourself. No one's going to come and knock on your door, unfortunately. And we always say that, there should be more help out there for veterans. There's over 2,000 charities for veterans in the UK. But they don't come and knock on your door because they don't know you need help.
That's right.
You've got to reach out and ask for it, really. And sometimes you don't know you need it.
No, a lot of guys who need it are too proud to ask, and that's us. And that's what that's what it is with us. I mean, when I left, it wasn't on my turn. So for a good 10 years afterwards, if you'd said to me, right, come back in, I would have done it. Now, absolutely not, no chance. But because I didn't leave on my terms, I just, yeah, for me, it wasn't, there was no closure there, as you say. I mean, even when I went into the ambulance service, I mean, the ambulance service was, to me, it would have been a fantastic job, because the earlier ambulance service was very much, lots of banter. You used to go out to just the bad jobs, really. So when you were coming back, there was lots of crewmates on the station to give you loads of grief, and to make sure you're okay. And it's that dark humour, because they've all been there, they've all seen it, they've all done it. Now it's completely different. I actually stayed in the ambulance service until the King's coronation, because I was working as a bank paramedic, and it was changing. There was lots of youngsters there, lots of just because it went through a university degree, and they seemed to just want to complain against you. So for me, it wasn't good. So I joined the ambulance service, became paramedic, worked on the motorbike. Mate, great. I love motorbikes. I'd love being a paramedic, and put the two and two together was fantastic. But the downside to that was you were seeing all the worst case jobs. So people who were,
I was going to mention that, I know a couple of guys who work in the ambulance service, and nothing kind of prepares you for that. As much training as you've got, when you go to that first shout that's a bad one, you're not prepared for that. Although your training takes over and you deal with it professionally.
Yeah, so there's never the same job. Of course, there's the same job. You can go to a cardiac arrest, and you're going to run through the protocols of how you deal with an arrest. There's an RTA an RTC now, where a car slams into either a pedestrian or another vehicle or a station such as a tree. So you deal with that, but no job is ever the same. So, for example, when I was on the bike once, and I won't say what this is, because I keep it the location secret. I keep the people's names. There's nothing there. I was on a motorbike, and I've been to a job, and then they said to me, right, okay, can you go to to one of the stations, because the crew are out. So I rode down there, parked up, and then they called me again and said, right, okay, the crew are on the way back, but can you go and stand by this part of the south coast, because they have these computers that dictate that sometimes that there's a higher percentage that something's going to happen at this stage. Anyway, I went there. All of a sudden, a job came through as a 13-year-old cardiac arrest. This young girl had come home from, so how it transpires, this young girl had come home from school, and she'd been a little sod at school. She was in trouble with her parents, so her mum said to her, right, I'm going to take your phone off you. The little girl then said to her, well, if you take my phone off, I'm going to hang myself. So mum, knowing full well that she wouldn't do it, took the phone off her. Now, I was 5 or 6 minutes away from this little girl when the call came through. So you're talking a good 2-3 minutes prior to the actual call coming through to me and from the parents, because usually, I mean, they phone and it's automatically dispatched to the nearest response. So what happened was this little girl had tied a noose around her neck, a last piece of string. It was the cord from her dressing gown. She tied it around her neck, tied it to the banister. Went to go and shout to her mum, saying, "Look, I'm going to commit suicide." Tripped and hung herself. So you don't know how long she'd been down by the parents' call. So the parents run upstairs, mate, screamed, saw her. I then got there. I got there, minutes later. Grabbed my kit, walked upstairs, and to do basic life support, because that's all I could do. Even though I was trained to do the advanced stuff, you can only do basic life support when you're on your own. So the crew was on its way to me. The crew was a good 10 minutes away. So I'm doing basic life support on this 13-year-old girl while I've got both parents, and you cannot replicate the guttural cries of parents. I'm working with this young girl, knowing full well that I'm not going to get her back. It's not possible. She'd been down too long before any CPR had been done. She hadn't had any breath in her at all, so she was dead. But I'm going through the actions and I'm hearing the guttural cries of these parents. They're the sort of thing that you can, that you have to take away with you. And this was I was seeing this daily. RTAs where there's fatalities, people being smashed inside cars, where the roll cage in this car is squeezing so much that the brain's squirting out the top of the head. It's just, other things like, cot deaths or kiddies used to do me big time. But I went to work one day, was driving to work and had this massive breakdown. That's wrong. So 2 or 3 days later, I woke up with central chest pain. 3 o'clock in the morning, woke up, real chest pain in my chest, in my jaw, going down my arm. I was like, shit, I'm having a heart attack. So I did everything that we tell people not to do. I went downstairs, I took some aspirin, I took some pain relief, I didn't phone for an ambulance, right? Drunk a whiskey, I was like, okay, let's get rid of this pain. I thought I was having a heart attack. Would have laid money I was having a heart attack, but I didn't do anything about it. The next day I was working on the response car, and it was on my local area where I was. So at lunchtime, I came home and I did an ECG on myself. So I did a trace from heart and it said inferior infarct suspected. So it was saying to me, look, we think you've had a heart attack, which made my blood pressure even worse. And of course, I'm now worried that I have had this heart attack. 2 or 3 days later, I'm driving to work, mate, and just pulled over. I was just bursting into tears, but just couldn't understand why I'm crying. 6'2", 15 stone. Why am I crying? Got to work. Actually, I was working in Swanage, and the guy there said to me, "God, you look like shit." I said, "Yeah." I said, he's retired now. I said, "Yeah." I said, "I have a bit of chest pain." He went, "Right, come on." They did an ECG. Again, inferior infarct suspected. He went, "Right." He said, "You've got to go off." Just then, I'm such a fucking hypocrite. Just then, the call came through that it was a chest pain. So I said, "Look, let's go and do this." So we jumped in the truck, drove to the job, and it was a woman. She'd had this chest pain for about 4 hours. And I'm attending. I said, "Listen," I said, "Right." I said, "You shouldn't mess around with chest pains." I said, "You have chest pains. You've got to phone the ambulance straight away." My mate looked at me and said, "You hypocrite." So I got to. We took her to A&E. I handed her over to the nurse. Gave the cardiologist my ECG that I'd done earlier. He went, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah." He said, "No, good call for bringing her in." I went, "Mate," I said, "That's mine." He went, "Fuck." He said, "You're coming in." I said, "Look," I said, "I can't." I said, "I've got to go to my local hospital." He said, "Right, I'm fine." He said, "But I'm phoning now to let them know you're there." And I went in, mate. At the time, I was a retained fireman as well. So I was in there for about a week and a half, just short of 2 weeks, having all the tests done to me. I mean, the tests were amazing. And it turned out to be stress related. So the fire brigade automatically put me in a thing called EMDR. ID sensitization, I don't know, I can't remember. And I did that, and it transpires that I was having complex PTSD, with the trigger point being on the 22nd of September, 1993. We were on patrol. Now, I wasn't supposed to be on patrol. I've been given the time off. But for some reason, call it sixth sense, I changed all I was a team medic at the time. I changed all my first aid kit for brand new first aid kit. And then that night, I volunteered to go out into the Ardoyne on a patrol as an extra man, and stepped around the corner just as Jamie was blown up by a coffee jar. So I then sprinted to Jamie, and he had typical blast injuries, mate, and his clothes had been blown off him. There was, you stemming the blood and all sorts. But one thing that got me was it was an indentation, really surreal, of the Queen's head in his leg. There was a where the 2P had hit his leg with such force, you can actually see the Queen's head. but loads of burns. And I remember saying to this little old lady, she was leaning over the fence. I went, "Can you give me some water, please?" Because I'd used my water bottle. So you use my water, can you give me some water, please? She went, "Fuck off, I hope he dies." Mate, it was like just a cold dagger through my heart. She'd seen it. She'd seen the British soldiers there killing people for decades. So she just had pure hatred, as we probably would now. Think about it. If we had the Irish army marching up and down the street killing people. So she had that, but that had a lasting effect on me. And also, whilst I was dealing with Jamie with the car bomb, with the coffee jar bomb, I'm thinking, fuck, a year ago, I was in South Armagh when there was a secondary device went off because they knew it was going to happen. So I'm giving him first aid thinking, right, okay, I'm going to get whacked in a minute if there's a secondary device here. But couldn't do anything just, because I was helping Jamie. So that was the trigger point. And everything else we'd seen after that, all this stuff that happened in Bosnia, and then the mass graves, and then the ambulance work, I went out to, so it just came and just apparently what happens is once you have a traumatic event, the trapdoor, unless you deal with it straight away, the trapdoor of your brain closes. So I was hearing, seeing and smelling the explosion literally for about 4 or 5 days afterwards. I'd go and go to try and go to sleep in the submarines where we were sleeping, and it's the blackest of black, in those things, isn't it? So I was laying there. Sometimes you can have amazing sleep, but I just couldn't sleep because every time I closed my eyes, I would hear, see, and smell the explosion. But I didn't say anything because in the early 90s, it was a sign of weakness if you'd said anything. You were potentially unreliable. So I didn't say anything, and I just dealt with it. And after a while, the pain numbed. And then a few weeks later, we had, Caroline was shot, and we'd just dropped her off on QRF. And I blame myself for that because I thought to myself, right, if we'd gone a different way or if we'd done this before we dropped her off, would she have been shot? So my mind was knackered, and the trapdoor closed, and everything was building up until the kiddies. I had a run of kiddies, and the trapdoor just burst, mate. I just couldn't take any more, and that's why I had the breakdown.
That's how it happens, mate. That's how it happens.
Yeah. Do you know what? The sad thing is, I was going to say, the sad thing is, I spoke to a mate of mine recently, and he's suffering from this tour of Ireland, but he hasn't got help. He hasn't sought help. And it's, you always think it's just you, but it's not. There are so many people out there who have seen things, done things. I mean, the things that we've seen. No normal person should see things like that. But again, it's not just what you see; it's what you smell, it's what you hear. All these different senses are fired into you, in an instantaneous burst, and it just has an imprint in your mind. And no mind should see those sort of things.
I mean, you say, we see things that nobody should see, but to us at the time, you just deal with it because it's not just your psyche, it's your training as well. You just deal with it and you fucking lock it away and you worry about it later. Some people it affects, a lot of people it doesn't. They can deal with this, they can say this, they can say that, and it doesn't. I interviewed a guy last week's podcast, and we spoke about their trauma and the trauma risk management type of stuff.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
And what he treats, and he's a firefighter, but he's also qualified to treat trauma. And he explained it to me in a way I didn't really understand at the time until he explained it. So it's not the incident generally that causes the PTSD. It's the trauma of something specific. And it's unlocking that part, and EMDR does help doing that. It's unlocking that part and dealing with that specific thing. He gave me an example where one of the firefighters was having issues, and it wasn't until they took him back through almost like EMDR, through like hypnosis, hypnotherapy, that they went over and over and over and over the incident. They thought, and it was just, he went, oh shit, that's it. The guy who was in the back seat looked like my dad, but I'd never thought that bit had been blocked away. But once he could deal with that and understand that that's what that was affecting him, it allowed him to move on. And is anyone ever cured of PTSD? I don't know, but they can, deal with it in a better way. And it was fascinating what he was saying about that. And I know guys who've been through EMDR. That was the final. They've been through all sorts of other things. When they got to EMDR, that was the bit that sorted them out. I think it's a fantastic bit of treatment. And luckily, the only thing I've ever had to do was get a bit of counselling, which for me it was just talking. I just needed to talk. I just needed to go there and let it all out, which really, really helped. Every now and again, you get a bit of a dip. But I just have a word with myself then, type of thing.
Come on, I mean, the fire brigade are very good at their post-incident debriefs. So I always remember, we'd go to a job, and if it was a fatality or or a decent job, even if it was just a barn fire or something, we'd always go around the back of the engine and all have a collective talk, or we'd have a talk when we got back to the station. The ambulance service at the time, I don't know what it's like now. The ambulance service wasn't brilliant. For example, again, I came back. I was working in the car. I went to a fatality on a very fast road near me, and again, the guy had been squashed in the car, and I needed the brigade to cut him out. So the brigade were en route. So control said to me, right, okay, because we'd taken the other patient. Well, they'd taken the other patient, so it was just me, the police, waiting for the brigade to arrive to cut this person out. And control said, right, okay, we're going to send the orderly officer just over to you. Went, yeah, no problem at all. So I sat by the side of the road by this crashed car, and I was doing all my paperwork. And the officer turned up, and he'd come from Bournemouth, so which is about, on blue lights, probably 30 minutes away, 35 minutes away. And he went, for fuck's sake, he said, if I'd known it was you, he said, I wouldn't bother coming. Because I'd seen, I mean, they used to call me shipman because of the amount of dead people I was seeing. But because it was me, because I'd seen it, you'll be all right. I mean, I was, at that stage, it wasn't. Did you find that, did you think that Ireland was worse? Did Ireland mess you up? Because for me, it was there was no decompression in Ireland. So in Iraq, there was always like the decompression. I don't know about Afghanistan because I never went there, but and it was different. So Iraq was a completely different beast. The houses were different, the people were different. They drove these shitty cars everywhere. There was sand everywhere. But Ireland was, you step out your front door and that could be Ireland. The only difference is that the people spoke different. So I remember we had this, me and a bloke called Trig Horsley, we just dropped this team off into the Ardoyne. We were going to go and do a drop off. So we dropped this team off. We were going to go and stay at Tennant Street IUC station. And then at the end, after they'd done their patrol for about a couple of hours, we were going to go and pick them up. And we got to Tennant Street, and the other section had gone over the road, and we got caught at the traffic light. And so I was stood there as a Saxon commander. I had Trigger and for some reason some para in the back. All of a sudden, this from Flat Street Mill. It used to be the old army base. This bloke fired around, and it literally passed between all three of us. But you felt the round go past, and you heard the round go past. So we all dropped inside. It was like, fuck, was that a round? And we started laughing. So we drove up to Tennant Street. But 4 days later, I was on my R&R in Dorset. Exactly the same shops, exactly the same phone boxes, walking down the road where 4 days later I'm walking down the road, stepping away from bags at the side of the road, looking up at the open window, thinking, shit, what's up there? There was no decompression, and that, I think that's the thing that really messed me up.
I've spoken to loads of guys who've come back from Iraq and Afghanistan, and being, I wouldn't say forced to go through decompression in Cyprus, and it was just shit for them. We come back our first tour of Ireland, and again I was lucky. Both my tours, for me personally, were very quiet. On the last tour, we lost Stevie Restrick and Coops. Stevie being the last guy shot.
But Stevie was taken out by the 5-0, wasn't
he? Yeah. And the guy who took him out is no longer with us, even though he got released early on Good Friday. But that's another story, and one that causes a great fucking deal of anger in a lot of people I know. We come back with our first tour. That was a straight on leave, gone. All right. Second tour, I was lucky. Me personally, it was 2 very quiet tours. I did the first Gulf War again. Nothing really to write home about that. I was a BCR. We ended up in Kuwait City, guarding the embassy, which was fucking weird, absolutely fucking weird. Second Gulf, out there 2003 in the war, across the line, do what you're supposed to be doing in the artillery and doing it well. Come back from that, and we were kept in camp for like 2 weeks, really, before anyone went on leave. So I think that was our decompression there. Bosnia, my first Bosnia tour, I was only given, fucking hell, we'd been to Jamaica on exercise. We got back on the Thursday. I was walking over to the armoury on the Friday after we got our weapons, get them out and clean them. I was going to take it back, and the battery commander pulled up. Where are you going with that? I says, take it to the armoury, man. Couldn't put it in the guard room. I says, why? Because you're going to Bosnia on Monday morning. I was like, fucking what? It was just like flash to bang, right, fine. And you deal with it,
Yeah.
Family wasn't very happy and stuff like that. Went out, did that tour with 19 Regiment, come back from that, and again, no decompression, no one, because I wasn't out there with like loads of my mates and, the subunit, like the battery I was in, like that. You didn't really have anyone to talk to about it when you got back, and you didn't really want to like say, oh, this happened, that happened, or whatever. You just talked about the funny things. Getting pissed and having a laugh and this, that, and the other. But you never talked about anything that was deep, dark, or bad. And you never, so you never got to get it out your system, type of thing. Like you said, the black humour with firefighters, with ambulance service, with the police. When I was looking, I was researching the app that we're doing and looking for, like I said, there's loads of support for veterans. There's very little for the rest of the blue light community. Just literally fuck all. I could find a couple of things for the police. I couldn't find anything for the ambulance service.
No, it's not brilliant.
It's really bad. And there's people out there that need this help. I did a suicide awareness course, and one of the things I was quite shocked about was, we all bang on about the veteran suicide, and it's not the highest in the UK, even by a cohort. It's not. Right, there's people like farmers, builders, labourers.
Oh, especially farmers.
Yeah, farmers, labourers, and somebody mentioned me. They said, "What about vets?" I said, "Well, I said veterans," and they went, "No, vets." I was like, "Really?" And then you think about it, most of the time they're working on their own, and then I went to fucking like put animals down and shit. That's going to take effect on you as well. Even when I was in the army, I could have probably killed someone, but I couldn't touch a dog. I was like, "Fucking hell, you couldn't do that," But I think that's just that's a daft example or whatever. But you're right. In our time, there wasn't. It got better as I got out in 2012. So, yeah. It got better, and now speaking to some of the guys who just recently left and stuff like that, and they do all the trauma management, the trim and stuff like that. It's all taken very, very seriously now.
Yeah.
And rightly so, because if anything kicks off again in the future, which potentially it could. I mean, I don't know what we'd fucking do. We've got no guns. It has to be, it has to be managed. It has to be looked at. People are very different nowadays to what we were like, just mentality-wise.
Yeah.
Could they handle it? I don't know. That's the thing. I mean, moving away from that, because that's quite
yeah.
You wrote a book.
Yeah. So the book is called Soldier of Conscience. Mate, it's done really well. So we're on our 3rd reprint at the moment.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I'm really, really not surprised, I am surprised, of course I am, because it's my first book. But I'm really pleased because I'm giving all of the royalties to charity. So I'm not taking a single penny for it. It's all going to go towards scoliosis. So the main body of the book is it is about raising the 30, raising 160,000 over the 13 years to help save Stefan's life. Around it are stories of being at school, being a little sod, getting caned, doing basic training as a young soldier, Ireland, South Armagh, Belfast, Bosnia. I then talk about I was on HMS Brazen, which was run aground off Chile. So that's a chapter. I talk about paramedic work. I go into talking about some of the jobs because, like I said, not all the jobs are bad. You have a lot of funny jobs there. I talk about working as a close protection paramedic in Iraq, working on a gold mine out in Sahara in Mauritania, and also my other fundraising stuff. Because so when I was in Africa, I cycled for 24 hours, and I got 24 local nationals and expats to cycle 24 hours on gym bikes to raise enough money to buy a new orphanage out there. I spent a week surviving on a life raft. It was to raise money for Great Ormond Street Hospital because all my fundraising had been for children outside the UK. So I wanted to get back to the UK. So I had this idea of spending a week on a life raft. Initially, I said, well, I'll just take 3 days worth of food and survive for 4. But my wife said, look, well, yeah, it should be easy for you. So I took 1 day's worth of food and 1,500 mils of water for a week. So I did research for Portsmouth University for a guy called Professor Mike Tipton into how the body copes in a survival situation. So I had to use a reverse osmosis pump, try and catch fish to survive and so forth. So I did that for a week. Probably one of the hardest things that I'd done.
I can imagine, especially reverse osmosis. No, thank you.
Mate, do you know what? It's such. So one of the things we said was because it's a short handle. So if you can have an extension of the handle, it would be easier because it's a short handle. You have to freaking do it for about 20 minutes before you get this little drop of water coming out. So I was limiting myself to 500 mils of water per day. I lost 17.6 pounds of weight in a week, and I only caught fish on the Friday, which was really good because on the Saturday, I literally Saturday morning, I gutted all the fish, cut all the flesh off, put it on the actual life raft because it was a really gloriously sunny day in April, really hot. So I let become like fish jerky. I was doing podcasts. I was doing like little video clips for send them back to shore, and a bloke called Duncan was putting them on the website for the kiddies to look at. And one of the things that all the little boys wanted to do was to see me eat fish eyeballs. So I did the video of eating the fish eyeballs for them and things like that. But I couldn't wake up that day. I was literally every time I was like falling back to sleep. And one of the things I was having to do was every 3 hours I was having to do my blood sugars, my urine output, and how much sleep I'd had that day. So it comes, and it's from 9 o'clock in the morning every 3 hours. It comes to like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I just managed to wake up and splash water on my face. I was like, shit, crikey, I've missed my thing. And I checked my blood sugars, and it was 1.1.
Jesus.
So I'd gone right down to just hyper. So I ate all the fish I'd caught, and it brought it back up to 4. So that was good. And my last fundraising event I've just done is so in 2019, June 2019, our daughter, she was 12, nearly 13 then, was diagnosed with idiopathic scoliosis, which is a curvature of the spine. Now, 4 weeks earlier, as far as we were concerned, she was she was deformity free. But as a 12, 13-year-old, you don't go to them when they're in a shower or bath. There's no need to. They get themselves dressed. She was pain free, so we didn't know. She didn't know. we had her measured at the hospital. She was 74 degrees deformity of the curve in the spine. So there was only one course of action, that was for her to have an operation. So in December that year, she'd gone up to 96%. So they operated, and it was the first time I was able to put my feet into the shoes of Slava and Stefan, Slava and Milos, because they said to us, look, she could become paralysed. She could die if we do something. It was like, so she was in this operation for just short of 6 hours, where they inserted 2 titanium rods into the spine, fused them all in there to straighten the spine. So I promised her I was going to do something to fundraise. That was 2019. 2020, we had COVID, so I couldn't do anything. I was put on the helicopter picking up COVID patients, and then I was working on the ambulance, doing COVID jobs. So in 2022, I think it's 22. Yeah, 2022. I walked from where she was diagnosed, from where we live, to where she had the operation. So, and that was in Southampton. So it was a total of 76 miles on a gammy leg, a gammy ankle. But every single step I took was backwards.
Fucking hell,
mate. So yeah, that was we limited it. So we were doing about 15 miles a day, and then we were sleeping, and then we'd crack on the next day. So it took us 5 days to walk the 76 miles. I fell over once, and that was literally as we got to the hospital at the end. The TV news crews were there and saying, right, yeah, can you? So they videoed it. So right, okay, can you do it again? So I walked back down the hill, turned around, walked up, and fucking slipped over this sign. So one time I landed on my arse, and that was then. So they're in the book, and the final chapter is called Mental Injury, where I confessed having complex PTSD because it stayed hidden for many years. But it's done really well. So, like I said, I'm giving all the money to charity. So far, we've got just over £4,400. If I can raise 4,600, then I'd raise 5,400 with the walk backwards. So that'll be 10 grand. But I'm not going to stop there. I'm going to try and raise as much as I can.
Where can people get hold of the book then?
So they can buy it from Pen and Sword. So they're selling it, or they can buy it from Amazon. And Amazon is either hardback or a Kindle. Unfortunately, at the moment, we haven't got an audio book, but we're working on it because they didn't realise it sells so good, so well. So it's been selling in America, Australia. I've even had sales in Norway. So it's done really well, mate. Really well.
I mean, we spoke about audiobooks before we started.
Yeah.
And I said, for me personally, I just can't. I can't be bothered reading anymore. I know that sounds shite, but it's for an audiobook, driving to work, and it's, to me, an audiobook's it's like a podcast. You know what I mean? It's like listening to someone's story, and it's great. I don't really listen to fiction, audiobooks, anything like that. It's just all autobiography stuff that I listen to. It's nice to understand. And again, I've found through doing the podcast as well that a lot of people are interested in what guys have done after their military service. Because people have done all sorts. Complete all world.
Yeah, far much more than we had a veterans meeting the other day in our ward. We have a smoker, and there was a guy there. One of the guys, he left as an RSM, and again he hadn't done much in his service, but he left as an RSM, went into close protection, worked in Iraq and Afghan, and he was the only survivor from a vehicle suicide bomber. And there's a great picture of him that he showed me from the paper. He walked out. He's got his weapon. He's just looking at him. But there's that 1,000-yard stare. And as he said, he's done far more since he's left than before.
Well, I mean, even just not like service like that. It's just like trades that people go into, and life moves on.
Yeah, absolutely,
massively. And some guys can't deal with it. Some guys get stuck, and I mean yourself because of the stuff you do with veterans as well. There's some very salty veterans out there, and as I'm discovering, there's some very, and I don't want to put a bad word against us lot really, but there's some very entitled people there, are self-entitled, and they think they should be getting this and should be getting that. No, it doesn't matter what you do, you've got to work for it. You can't just be given everything. You have to work for it. You have to put enough effort in to get the reward. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, what's your plans for the future then?
Well, I'm actually writing a book at the moment. It's a fiction about a paramedic. I've got another fundraising event which is organised for next year, which is going to raise money for a local veterans hub. And again, but that's walking backwards, but over a greater distance in a day. Mate, do you know what? I'm just enjoying myself. I work as an offshore medic. I work for an amazing company called Deep Ocean Group. It's a Norwegian company, but they really do look after their staff. And I've worked in Norway now for 5.5 years. No, sorry, just short of 5 years. Apologise, just short of 5 years. And I'm just moving to Africa, so I'm going to be starting working there 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off. So the old boy only works 6 months of the year. Thankfully, touch wood, I never see any dead people anymore. I just do a little bit of suturing every now and then, chest infections, antibiotics, eyes, ears and teeth, and fingers, mate, and that's me. And I live in a house full of women who give me so much grief. It's harder to be in a house full of women than it is being at work.
Yeah. I wouldn't say luckily I live on my own now, but yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I really do. Right, we've been on nearly 2 hours. That's flown by, that has.
Mate, do you know, this has been absolutely fantastic, Frank. It's felt like you just sat here talking to a mate.
Yeah, and that's what this podcast's about. There's no formality. Some of them have been quite serious. Some of them have been really funny. I mean, it's just a chat, and that's what people like about it. And like I say, it's not formal. We don't fucking have no airs or graces or anything like that. What I'll do before I say goodbye is I'll put the links. I'll get the links for the book. And as we mentioned earlier before this podcast, this one's coming out really quickly. So it'll be out Friday.
Hey, happy days.
Yes. I've had them where people have had to wait months for their podcast to come out. And, yeah. Yeah. No, it's back on now.
Done then. There you go. Right, so I've taken a screenshot. I'll put it on my Instagram.
Yeah.
Well, mate, honestly, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks, Frank.
No bother, mate. Honestly, I've enjoyed it, every minute of it. Right, I'm going to stop the recording now, so I'll say goodbye.
All right, pal. Listen, take care. Thank you very much. And yeah, if I've got, I'll see what I can do about Damien and go there for you. All right, pal.
I hope you enjoyed that podcast. I enjoyed recording it. If you could just hit the like button, and also if you could subscribe and hit the notification bell, that'd be great, because it'll help the channel grow. The more people will see it, the bigger it'll get, and the more guests I can get on, and the more people I can talk to. Well, I hope you enjoyed it, like I said. Look forward to the next one. Hopefully we'll be out next week as normal. Bye-bye now.